Welcome to Diaspora Dialogues. I'm Chitra, co founder of Punjab Cultural Project. In the Diaspora Dialogue series, we're going to chat with members of the Indian or Punjabi diaspora across the world to understand from them how we as cultural entrepreneurs can better engage with diaspora, network with them, and leverage them as customers, collaborators, business partners, or even investors. There's lots to learn from our panelists who have been handpicked from around the world. They would be either cultural entrepreneurs or system enablers or stakeholders in some form or the other. And I'm sure that you're going to find their insights, experiences, and learnings super useful in your own journey as a cultural entrepreneur wanting to do business with the rest of the world. So, our panelists today, which are Raj, Aditi, and Saili, work across a wide swathe of geography. So, Raj is based in Canada. Aditi works across Asia, India, and Southeast Asia. Saili is from Punjab, currently based in London, if I'm not mistaken. And and that's where you're from Delhi, and you're dialing in today from London. So, we have that experience coming in from all those markets: Canada, India, Europe, Southeast Asia. And professionally, they also cover a range of roles. They're entrepreneurs, they're investors, and they're all influencers in their own right and experts in their subject area. Raj, is there anything before we get into the Q&A that you would like to add to my introduction of you in this context?
Certainly. I'll just take a brief minute. Thank you so much. First of all, it's a pleasure to meet both Chitra and Raman and my co-panelists for today's session. My background really, I've lived in 5 different countries growing up. Dad was a diplomat, so we were very fortunate to travel with them. I lived in Iran, Italy, South America, and then ended up in Canada. And of course, a couple of years of my life have been spent in India. I've spent the last 20 plus years literally in the India market. And the reason for that was I looked at a tremendous opportunity of digitization and leveraging technology on how to actually help India scale as well. And so I took that first plunge back in 2005 and decided to bring technology into India and successfully launched education, fintech, and telecom-based platforms. But prior to that, my background is slightly interesting because I'm an engineer by training, but I quit my job, after working with General Electric for 5 years to actually launch an Indian restaurant. So we talk about cultural economies, and it was one of those jump right in. My dad looked at me and said, "Are you crazy?" And I said, "No, I'm not crazy. I'm not asking you for any money. I'm going to invest." My brother and I decided to invest, and we built one of the most successful Indian restaurants in Canada, notably, one of the top 100 in Canada in restaurants. And then morphed into a travel business, morphed into building a travel portal, and then morphed into investing in different companies. So my background is fairly varied. I was also a big promoter of Indian culture. So I was a promoter of Indian shows, of ghazals, Bollywood singers, all of that, back in the 80s and the 90s. So I've had a deep dive into culture, but at the same time, leveraging what I consider cultural diasporas, not just aspirations, but the ability to instill and make way for others to take the lead as well in this area. So I just wanted to add that. And thank you for having me on this panel.
Great, thank you, Raj. So let me jump into the first question that I wanted to put to you today. Okay, so let's set a little bit of context here. You have worked with cultural businesses, set up your own as well in Canada. First of all, would you say Canada has what we might call a thriving cultural economy? How would you characterize that?
Great question. So look, to kick off, yes, Canada in itself is a land of culture. It's a land of immigrants. There's no such thing except for the Aboriginal people. Canada is really based on immigration. It's based on people coming from all parts and ethnicities of the world. So in essence, we look at the Indian and the Chinese communities that make up roughly, 8 to 10% of our population. The balance of the people came from Europe. They came from, parts of Europe, parts of other countries, Ukraine, Russia, Australia, UK. So the Brits, the French, and the Americans obviously had a lot of influence in Canada, but the other cultures have brought a lot of their own culture. So in terms of the economy, absolutely, when we look at whether it's importing of food products, importing of food and services, importing of knowledge, yoga, Ayurvedic, I'm giving an example of the Indian businesses that have thrived. Indian food today, is top of the list. Any restaurant you go to, butter chicken has got to be on the menu. Doesn't matter whether you're a pub, whether you're a roadhouse, or whether you're an Indian restaurant. Just in itself, our economies across Canada, we must have 10,000 Indian restaurants across Canada. And therefore, that's one example of the cultural economy. The other part of it is tourism, the other part. So, yes, Canada in itself, the government has established so many programs that provide grants and capability expansion and growth for education, and as well as, mass commercialization. So, National Film Board of Canada is another example. They have a massive budget where they fund the building and the making of documentaries. And this is actually leveraged. You'd be surprised next time you're watching a documentary, wait for the titles at the end. You'll see the National Film Board of Canada as one of the sponsors of that documentary.
And having worked across both Canada and India now, and I know you've also been getting involved somewhat with some cultural enterprises in India as well.
Yeah.
What's the difference in mindset when it comes to investing in culture-led businesses in these two places?
Yeah, great question again. I, the last several years, I've actually had the pleasure of spending a lot of my time in the northeast of India. So one example of this is Erie Silk. Just as one example, I went to meet these artisans in, outside of Shillong. It's roughly 40 kilometers, but it takes 2 hours to get there because the roads are, inaccessible. It's a pretty rough ride to get into that part of the region. So what does that tell you? What it tells you is that there's so much, I would call opportunity that exists in every corner of India, every cornerstone of India. But unfortunately, the programs don't exist to help these people, to educate them, to empower them, to actually put them on the map. I had to go look for all of this. I engaged someone locally in Shillong, and I said, have you heard of this, Erie silk? No, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. We get clothing from it. There are artisans, there are these ladies that make things. So, I spent a whole day sitting with these artisans just to try to understand what drives them. But more important, how can we take their, I call it specialty or their specialization, and try to bring it to the rest of the world. So this is one example. And like that, I've come across many. When I built my restaurants, one of the things my brother and I decided to do was actually to incorporate Indian culture and Indian artifact. So we actually customized lamps, we customized our menus, everything was handmade. So, I had artisans making our menus, which were 6 pages of silk screen printing. This is all things that, evolved in India. We just didn't go to a printer and say, make us a black and white menu. So our idea was to promote the culture as well.
Yeah, so like you said, what's missing for these people, I think one of the gaps that we found with PCP itself is that the artisans may or may not want to be entrepreneurs. It's a lot to ask of someone who's, making silk to also find a market for it and sell it and brand it and tell the story. So, what do you think is the solution here? Like, is really empowering a layer of cultural entrepreneurs, is it a viable answer? And if it is, then what would be your tips? To these sort of cultural entrepreneurs on approaching diasporic investors like yourself to grab your attention.
Yeah, look, again, the element of that really evolves from, you nailed it. The artisan doesn't necessarily want to be an entrepreneur. They don't realize that they're already an entrepreneur because that's their survival mode. An Erie Silk lady who's actually making fabric doesn't realize that her entire household runs on that. However, can she scale? No, only because everything's done by hand. So guys like myself or others who will come in can actually help her and either become not just a middleman, but become that mentor, become that facilitator. What would it take for you to make 20 of these units a week versus making two a week? So the essence then is, if you spend that time with them, build their trust, because they have the skill, but they don't have the skill to bring this to market. So entrepreneurs like us have to step in either with funding, have to provide some mentorship, guidance, and also bring someone that may have a business mind and create a small enterprise that assist these people to get to market. You instill the right qualities and the support system, the ecosystem, which is what you guys are creating. When I look at your agenda, you're building platform, academy, and accelerator, right? What you're doing is bringing the three together, and all three are needed. Trust me, every one of those components is necessary for that last mile artisan to actually be successful. So we will bring investors. My advice would be find the right investor, find the right mentor, and they're not sitting around waiting for you. They're also coming at you. So be open to the ideas that come to your way.
I'm not the artisan. I'm not the investor. I'm the entrepreneur in the middle who is facilitating a business, creating a business. I want it to be profitable. I can take it to scale. I have those skills. I can mobilize the last mile artisans. What are some of the misconceptions I might have in my mind when it comes to raising funds to do all of this?
Well, look, not everybody's an investor that is really interested in the cultural economy because people view cultural economies as a very slow-moving vertical and slow-moving and very, I would call it, not automated. It's, very factually, everything's done by hand. So if I had to get, I gave the example of Erie Silk. This person can produce 10 shawls a week. You're not going to build a business on 10 shawls a week, right? So now you've got to find five others who can add to that. And perhaps down the road, look at automation of some sort. But if you do the automation, you lose the element of the hand prepared, handmade products. So I think as an investor, entrepreneur, yes, you've got to recognize the skills that you're looking at, and at the same time, if you're going to invest in them or bring the investment to them, to be able to demonstrate the bigger picture and the roadmap. A 3 month, 6 month, 12-month roadmap is so critical. People always ask for 3-year roadmaps. I don't believe in 3-year roadmaps. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So, be clear, keep it a very short window so that short window demonstrates achieving results and measurable results. So, those are the elements that investors look for and investors always look at. I mean, I look at this, I speak to entrepreneurs. The passion is number one. You can't teach passion, right? You either have it, it's like the two of you. You and Raymond are building something because it's your passion. And what you're going to do is you're going to enable thousands of people to achieve their future. But that didn't start because somebody said, here's, $1 million, go do it. This is your money. You guys are investing. This is what investors do, right? And this is what we all are built on.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. And you actually gave me a lot of food for thought, which segues well into the conversation we wanted to have with Aditi today, which is around these questions of, does cultural entrepreneurship have to have a social entrepreneurship component? Is there some way to balance profit and purpose and all of that? So, Aditi, let me come over to you now in this discussion. But before I get in the questions, would you like to add something around the context of the work you do for this conversation today?
Sure. Also, first, thank you for having me on this. I think part of the reason why I like doing these panels, I also get to meet other interesting panelists and listen to them and learn from them. So, I love that about my job. The just you were just talking about Raj was just talking about sort of supporting ecosystems for entrepreneurs. So, part of my career, for the first part of my career, I spent being a journalist and working in the media. And then the second part of my career, I actually, I've worked in different capacities supporting entrepreneurs. I've worked at an incubator, at a fund, educational programs that work with entrepreneurs. And then I finally decided to make my life even more complicated and become an entrepreneur myself. So I've kind of, seen this at different angles, which is why hopefully I can bring some of those insights to today's conversation. As you mentioned, Unlock Impact is the company that I started that we look at two things. We work at the intersection actually of social impact, entrepreneurship, and gender. So even within the entrepreneurship space, we are a bit more focused on women-led businesses, women who are early stage, setting up businesses, growing them. And I think there is especially when it comes to cultural entrepreneurship, you do find like a lot of women do tend to set up businesses that are more sort of community focused, working with handicrafts, arts and culture, all of those kind of things. So hopefully you can bring some of that together for today's conversation. Yeah.
So let's get into the first question, which is a tough one. But do you really think it's necessary for cultural entrepreneurship to be boxed into this as a subset of the impact economy, or can it step out and be part of the mainstream economy?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I think that, of course, the obvious answer is that it can very much be part of the mainstream economy. And I think in some ways it is. We've always had like festivals and exhibitions and, literature festivals, art festivals, music, film. And so, in a very broader sense, it has always been part of mainstream, but it's just that it's very fragmented. And then when you bring in the entrepreneurship and investing lens, specifically in India, we still have at some level a roti kapda makan kind of approach, right? In the sense that a lot of the focus on entrepreneurship and people who are investing it is in solving huge problems. And like even a small problem that reaches a lot of people in India, in the scale of things, it still seems like, like, okay, a few thousand or a few lakh people is not, but people want to solve for like 1 billion, right? And therefore it tends to go into the zone of technology, financial inclusion, health, livelihoods, the big problems, education, because we're still struggling with all of that. So when you look at it at that lens, cultural entrepreneurship kind of tends to get relegated into like more patronage. It's something that people support because it's a nice to have, and but we still have that, but there are bigger problems to solve, right? But at some level, it is very much a part of the mainstream. We actually have very successful cultural entrepreneurs, um, especially in like film and music and stuff, right? Like, Diljit Dosanjh is one of the most successful cultural entrepreneurs we've had recently. So that is a great example of, what that can do, and the economy that is built around him. Like I live in Goa. I'm not in Goa right now. It's, but for example, like we have these festivals around this time of the year. There are two, three there's the film festival, there's Serendipity, which is something that's been launched more recently, or like, there's the Jaipur Lit Fest. So these are all actually very good examples of, an economy that has come up around all of this stuff. Tourism, it's promoted a lot of activities, and Serendipity especially is a great example because it's multimedia, multi format. It goes it's dance, music, but also like local artisans. It talks about ecology, and it's because people are now coming in to actually attend this festival, it's boosting tourism as well, right? So it's actually covering all aspects of it, and that's as mainstream as it gets. So yes, short answer is I think definitely possible, but I think why some of these people are managing to do it is I think you definitely need to economic impact you have to demonstrate. I think that's the sort of first, most important thing. And I think in today's day and age, definitely being able to harness some level of technology, um, so that something things can be done at scale. I think these are definitely two things I think that would help to mainstream it more. And of course, institutional support, right? Government partnerships, civil society partnerships, all of those kind of things. I think so. To summarize, I think like it is there. It is part of the mainstream, but it's very fragmented. And people look at it with different lenses. But I think if some of these things came together and some people are managing to do it well, then I think it can have that broader impact.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there are cultural entrepreneurs doing successful businesses in pockets, but it's not coming together to build a cultural economy for a state and the members of the community of that state. And I think that's where a more concerted effort needs to be made. And what's also interesting about the examples you mentioned is obviously they've all told very interesting brand stories, and they've
Yeah.
created brands and properties that have become aspirational and can be repeated and scaled. Like now the JLF goes to so many locations, even beyond India. We have
Exactly.
Jaipur Literature
Yeah.
Festivals
Yeah.
across the world now. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that story building aspect and the brand building aspect of building cultural enterprise.
So we're in a very crowded digital space now, right? So there is, on one hand, people have to, really compete for attention and therefore because of that, there is also, there is doubt around authenticity and all of those kind of things. But at the same time, being able to reach people in other parts of the world, all over the world, what we're doing right now, right? Like, and digital, and being able to do it in such a cost-effective way, I think is huge. So it's really about the digital communication. I think is very very has become very integral to really building strong brands, because you can actually you can put so little money into it and actually get a very good return on investment. Um, but that's where the sort of fear around authenticity and everything comes in. And again, I think I always tell people, like, if you kind of there are several brands that I think have managed to do this, right? So there are, I mean, there's the sort of big mama of this is Fab India, but there are other brands that have actually they've stayed Forest Essentials, I thought, was another good example. Chumbak, stayed very they've built brands, but they've also stayed very true to what they are. And Chumbak is a very good example of that, right? You know exactly what kind of products it is, what they are about. Fab India has gone through an evolution, but they've always, and I think all of them have a few things in common. One of them being that they're very very purpose has always come first for them, right? And if that is so that, and I think that's where the authenticity piece comes in. If there is purpose, it doesn't necessarily have to fall under this thing of social impact, but there's a very clear purpose, and that purpose is communicated, and that is part of the brand, and it's not just sort of like just like a washing that you're doing, but it is who you are. People can't be fooled easily. Like, we know, you can't take a customer for a ride. People, you can tell when something is inauthentic, and I think increasingly in this digital space, people are looking out for that. Younger people, but everyone is people are sort of aligning more with brands that display certain values, and they wear their values on it. At one time it used to be like, okay, your core values are just sort of something that is very internal, but the brands that are actually building strong stories are actually wearing their hearts on their sleeves and their values and putting them out there and following through with that. And I think everything else will fall into place. How do you market? How do you communicate? How do you reach people? But if this very clear purpose, what are your values, what do you stand for, I think that's one big part of it. um Financial sustainability of course is integral to this, because that's when you see long term sort of effects of what you're doing. But profit and purpose, so your goals that you're setting need to be around both, right? What is Yes, you want to reach a certain level of revenue or profitability or whatever, but also what does that mean in terms of what is the impact or the purpose of your brand? What do you want to? And I think often people, like, the thing with nonprofits or NGOs is that it'll be only impact focused, and the thing with the for-profit organizations, it's the leaning is more towards the
Profits
revenue
and
goals and things like
yeah.
that. So but making this front and center as a core mission of the organization, I think, is super important. And also being able to show that you're reinvesting, right, in the cultural values that you're standing for. So allowing, it could be a simple thing of, like, taking a part of your profits, but putting it back into something to preserve certain values or community initiatives that you're working on. I think these are some of the ways. So I would say if this is there in the organization, it will sort of get communicated better. And that's how you build a brand from the inside out.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is really interesting because from what I'm hearing you say, purpose can actually be leveraged to build a stronger brand story.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be at a cross purpose at all. While a totally commercial organization might make compromises, say, on the transparency in the supply chain or how much they're paying the artisans that are producing the stuff. And similarly, on the other end of the spectrum, an NGO might be completely focused on the well-being of the artisan, not caring about the scale or the revenue that's actually coming through. So a cultural enterprise in the middle might be in the best position to balance the purpose and weave that into the story to actually charge a premium, saying that we are so mindful of, say, the supply chain, making sure everything is fair trade, that we may have to charge more than a
Absolutely.
competing commercial organization, but that's a choice you're making to support, right, as the consumer. Mentor, your organization mentors and works with a lot of organizations of different kinds. When I know there's a lot of cultural enterprises within that as well, even your recent She Leads cohort, there were a couple of quite a few cultural enterprises there, people who are working with heritage, handloom or crafts, etc. So how have you seen that mindset for both investors, and you also work with investors, bringing pitch contests and investor clinics and stuff to your mentees. So how have you seen the mindset and landscape evolve when it comes to specifically cultural enterprises in Asia?
Yeah, so I think so. I'll speak to two parts. So I think so in India, and Raj spoke about this as well, right? It's a more complex market. Over the last 10 years, the whole sort of investing landscape has, changed a lot, and it's big checks are being written. But like I said, very focused on more on these sort of big mass tech solutions. However, what has also happened is that there has been sort of great, gender lens investing, for example, has definitely gained traction, and also more sort of blended finance, where it's not just pure VC investing, but different kinds of models that actually will support smaller organizations that have impact at their center. So that's how India's kind of changed. In Southeast Asia, it is a bit more emerging. So in terms of sizes of businesses, ticket sizes, it's still a bit smaller, and the focus there again tends to be a bit more things like health and livelihoods, very true there as well. But for example, climate resiliency, ecology, these are things that people are focusing more over there, and definitely a rise of HNIs, family offices. So what I mean to say by all of this is that there's a lot more options now. So while everything, as an entrepreneur, as a cultural entrepreneur, everything, I always say, people think Shark Tank, it's not always Shark Tank, right? You don't have to go there and have 5 minutes to pitch and someone writes you a check, and it's great, it happens, but that's a really, really small percentage of people, right? There are a lot of other options out there, and all types of financing available. I mean, I'm talking about financing because we're talking about scaling businesses, and one is not going to happen without the other. So I think it's more of, that's where a lot of awareness and understanding needs to come in, because there are a lot of other options. And we see a lot, and therefore, and I mentioned this earlier, because we work primarily with women entrepreneurs. Women entrepreneurs do tend to launch more community focused initiatives. It's quite common to see them sort of solving problems around them, right? For the community, working with artisans, working with handicrafts, things that are more very organically sort of circular in their economy and everything. So we do actually see a lot of those, but that's where the disconnect happens. These are not businesses that those big VCs are looking to support. However, there are other options. There are grants. It's slower moving. They're a little more. There are more limitations to them. And a lot of our work is around sort of talking about the fact that there are different ways to build successful businesses, and it's not only this one Silicon Valley narrative, of this is, so yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that there are different options. It's slower, it's more of a patience game, and it's not necessarily this very classic form of like, investing, but there are options out there. And I think if we have to just think of building these businesses differently and not looking at them as these like crazy like unicorn growth kind of thing, and that's fine and that's okay.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think opening up our minds to the fact that there are many models for funding today, and you might even begin your enterprise with a grant or a fund, and then once you've proven the model, you might actually find
Exactly.
more interest from traditional investors as well. So yeah, that's a great tip, and I think we should do more to promote or talk about these various options to our community as well moving forward. So thank you for that. Great. So now let me move to Saili and ask her some questions. And again, Aditi, some of what you said really, I think, is a great segue into Saili's area of expertise and what she's working with. We'll talk a bit more about the storytelling aspect and the authenticity and engaging with diaspora, Saili. But first, would you like to take a minute to just talk about the work you're doing currently and specifically your Ahata project in Punjab as well?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, thank you for having me. And it's been a pleasure listening to both Raj and Aditi because I don't come from an economics investment background. So I was taking notes throughout. So this was really informative. So just to speak about what am I doing right now, I'm a researcher at University of London under visual and material anthropology. And my research thesis is about kinship in Punjab through visual and materials. But I started Coco and Jasmine about 7 to 8 years ago. And for larger understanding, it's a print magazine. We print annually, it's advert free, but it's about global cultures. It's not just about Punjab. And covers various anthropological themes. But to support my business of running an authentic storytelling platform, I run a creative agency where I lend my services to different institutions and brands, which is interesting. I'm sharing this because, like we were speaking about, finding alternative ways to finance your businesses and not actually having sort of this. A very shark tank approach to how you want to do things. So apart from the research and the publication, Ahata project is something of focus. So Ahata actually means a common courtyard in different languages. I think in Bengali as well, other than Punjabi. My reference was that Ahata Punjab is an Ahata between India and Pakistan. So the project kind of started as, can Punjab become a cultural melting pot, which it is in mainstream narrative between the two countries, which has been largely war, politics, religion, unfortunately because of colonization. So Ahata came from a very sort of like personal space because I was looking at family archives, and I started to sort of dig deeper and ask my questions about my own lineage and how what Punjab means to me. Currently, the primary thing that we're trying to do is that I spent last 4 years mapping a lot of different communities in Punjab, particularly in textiles. So I started to think about how do I connect these communities to the global audience that I already have through my publication and agency. And we came up with a residency model. So how a residency works is that people from around the world, from multidisciplines, come together and live in Punjab and actually respond to different ecologies. Now, this is not actually just limited to crafts or textiles. It could be architecture. It could be, any sort of creative medium, film, photography. And we just had our first residency last month, and it went super well. And I'm already sort of working towards the next one. We're, speaking to so many different people. So this is just I would say, a unique model in a way because it is kind of bringing in educational sort of aspects, but then there are travel aspects, and then there are aspects that are intangible because I don't know what people who attend these will now land up doing and how new ecosystems could kind of come out of Punjab. So it's interesting because I spoke about this project last year at the different universities I was guest lecturing at, and from that point to what it has become now to what I foresee it becoming next year, I think it's already gone through an evolution, and I think I just absolutely love the sort of open-endedness to this business model and this way of working, which might just be the essence of all cultural businesses. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to like highlight that because, sometimes being a cultural entrepreneur also means you're very intimidated by certain terminologies and business plans and strategies. And just not having that has worked in my favor. So yeah, that's a longish introduction.
Are actually a cultural entrepreneur. You're a practicing cultural entrepreneur. You're doing it. You're walking the talk. So it's really interesting to hear from your point of view how your mindset has evolved as well with running all these different businesses. And that brings me to, one of the things, Sally, you have done really well and successfully is engaging global clients, customers in Italy and in the fashion industry and in the publications industry, people in England. I think your residency also had people from overseas who came for it. Okay. So, what
It's
are the
only for
lessons you
overseas.
only from overseas? So, you've only had foreigners come into Punjab and do a residency and go back, taking all those stories and experiences and immersive moments with them. So, from a very practical perspective, I think our audience would be so curious to hear from you. What's the story you told to a bunch of people in Europe to make them put down their money and say, sign me up, take me to Punjab and let me, spend 5 days over there? What was it? What was the approach?
So the residency was 2 weeks, and next time we're going to do 4 and 6 weeks. So the commitment needed from the attendees was a long sort of commitment. I don't think that they were interested in Punjab for the stereotypical image that Punjab has globally. They were, one, I think they believed my concept because they knew Coco and Jasmine. Two, I think because they didn't actually enough know about Punjab. Like people know enough about Rajasthan, people know enough about, I don't know, Kashmir or Kerala. So there is this curiosity. And the reason we chose to do a residency and not a travel program was because we wanted applicants who are interested in the themes that we're going to cover in the residency than the destination itself. So people who applied and came were interested in traditional weaving, they were interested in traditional pottery, they were interested in the program that we had designed rather than just Punjab. They weren't signing up for a holiday in Punjab, they were signing up for the course. So, which is why I feel like the model worked and appealed to a lot of people. Though, just for information, I do want to say that out of the 1,500 people who applied, 1,200 were diasporic communities. So there's a great observation here that people want to connect with their roots, and that's something to think about when it comes to why people even invest in culture.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. Diaspora, you probably bumped into a lot of members of the diaspora community in your travels overseas. What do you think we get wrong, us living here in India, running our businesses, if we don't have the kind of exposure that you've had? Okay. What do we get wrong about that diasporic mindset? What are we missing? Or how can we better engage them?
I don't know if there's one way. Diaspora from where? Like diaspora also has so much demographic, right? Like Canadian diaspora is so different from American diaspora, so different from the people in the UK, so different from people who, interbred. Because like I had this woman who was half Punjabi, half Puerto Rican who had come. So it's not one formula. Like I mean, if that's what you're looking for, I wouldn't say that's. But I think being a listener has helped. Being a listener about their curiosities of how they connect with Punjab, what are they interested to know, and what is their personal connection to land, uh, and kind of being open ended to that. I think, like, just to give you an example, the conversation I had with Manjot Bent, who's sort of like a cultural journalist in Vancouver. We had this conversation around a Hatha project, and everybody in the room was from the diaspora, right? But somebody had some story, the other had another story. And I feel like this kind of diversity within diaspora, I think accepting that and kind of seeing what is the need of the hour. People want to connect, people want to connect through programs, people want to connect through education, people want to connect through content. So I think that's been the approach. There's no like strategy that I went with, that I have this product that I want to create and So hence I need to look for this market with this kind of target appetite. I don't think that was the approach. I think the approach was more like putting myself in those groups and kind of assessing, what is the need of the hour? How would I bring people together? How would people engage? And then creating something.
Yeah, I think, three really great takeaways from that, practically speaking. One is, you built a community and a foundation of credibility before you actually started selling, let's call, for a lack of a better word, the Hatha residency, right? So you had Coco
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Jasmine, you had a community of followers who trusted, what you were doing. So that's one great takeaway, to build that sort of presence there and start engaging with community before you actually try to sell something. And secondly, I think you spoke about the product itself. Okay, it's not about, say, if it's tourism, it's not just a destination, it's the whole immersive experience, it's the whole behind the scenes, engaging people with the behind the scenes process of even making, say, handicrafts. If you're trying to sell handicrafts, these two, plus what Siley said about listening, keeping an open mind, and not trying to box diaspora and make assumptions about them, but really to listen and understand what their expectations are before trying to pitch either a business or an investment opportunity or a product or service to them. I think these were three really great takeaways. If there's a traditional cultural entrepreneur, say they are, want to sell pulkari jackets, or they want to sell juttis or pottery from here, or weed bags, the grass and reed typical that we find in Punjab, those bags. What's the gaps you're finding in product market fit there, having worked with companies like Good Earth and stuff like that, and what's needed to bridge?
I would insist on 2, 3 things. One, uh, innovation in the product, right? Like, because I think that's a problem with the craft sector in general. How many of the same embroideries can I keep buying? So do you have like an innovative idea that sets you apart? And this innovation can be in technology, it can be in design, it can be in your story too, right? Like, does it have something that's different from people that are already, in the market? So are you adding value? So I think it's very important to ask that question in any cultural business. What value are you adding? Because there's also already too much of everything. So I think that would be something that's very important. Second would be, I think, how ethical are you? And this is such an open-ended term, but I do think that, like, are you actually collaborating with communities, or has it just become like the same sort of workshop model where they are working for you? So in craft communities specifically, I feel like when it comes to working with craft communities, it's very important that you are truly engaging with them, taking their sort of input in your business and your product. And I feel like in the long run, that really is important in your storytelling, in your brand building, in your, like, kind of, even like brand stakeholder, they are your brand stakeholders. So businesses who are just commissioning projects to craft communities, I feel like then it just becomes a fashion business, whereas it's a cultural business when you are actually bringing those communities into the picture uh, in a sort of like larger ecosystem. Does that make sense? I mean, so I feel like with Ahata specifically, there's actually a design aspect to it as well. We've actually worked with a few designers in California to create home collections with Punjabi textiles. So it was really important for me that the identity of the textile is not massively changed in the end product. So hence, I would like to believe that it's a cultural engagement and not just a
Trading
designing,
engagement.
yeah,
Yeah.
a trading engagement, correct. So I would say, like, these 2 things I would keep in mind to answer your question. I hope it answers your question.
No, it was great. And I think you actually, Raymond and I were speaking about this earlier in the evening, that what really makes a cultural enterprise a cultural enterprise. I think you expressed it beautifully, that, you're not just a midway guy, taking things from here and putting them there, but you're actually very engaged with the supply chain, with the partners through that supply chain, and keeping it transparent and ethical becomes part of that story, an important part of that story. So thanks, I
Also,
think.
yeah, and also thinking about two-way engagement, because something that I wanted to add during my residency sharing was that it isn't just about the outsiders who are coming to Punjab to learn from Punjab. It's also about the communities locally, the exposure they get and the learning they get from the residents who are visiting as well. So what was very interesting was that, for example, pottery became like the most important sort of prominent highlight of our residency program, which I initially didn't think would become. And why was because the potter has been a potter all his life from a Kumhar community, 45 years in Ropar, which is an Indus Valley excavation site. He's made pots one way. By the end of the residency, he learned 3 new designs. So I think also thinking about cultural exchange, which is a two-way exchange, which is not always thought about in a design business. Yeah.
Great point. Really great point. I think lots to think about there for anyone who's thinking about a business in this space, which our audience is full of. So thanks for that. And, we're just about on the hour, and I just wanted to go quickly around the panel here for a 1 minute sort of wrap up from each one of our panelists, observations, thoughts, and ideas. So Aditi, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about this when Sally was talking, and I think, and you had asked me this question earlier as well. And I think she had the advantage of sort of being in the place and, having access to some of the networks and connections. So, but how can that be done for people who don't? And I think that's a lot of the, if you're able to sort of enable, and I'm saying this from the experience of, so I'm based in India, but my partner is based in Southeast Asia, and we have challenges even sometimes just working across the regions, right? And especially when we want to get into like financial transactions and things like that. So I think one of the critical things that would really be very helpful is, what kind of commercial and legal support could entrepreneurs get? That just information, how do you navigate certain, how do you navigate certain systems? Where can you, what are the kind of things you can apply for? I think those are some very, those are not the sexy things that people talk about, but those are actually the very useful things that will help you, because sometimes you just need that kind of information. So I think that's a great starting point really for anyone who's looking, whether it's entrepreneurs in India sort of wanting to go abroad, or cross border relations. I think that's a great starting point, and maybe that's something that's sort of more tangible and practical to start focusing on and thinking about. So yeah, I just want to leave people with that.
I'll leave with a couple of parting thoughts. Trust is a very important one. One of the elements that I've learned in my last, 20, I'm going to say 35 years of doing business across the India-Canada corridor, first with my restaurants and then with my tech work. I've found one commonality, and that is trust. It's about transparency. And a lot of us experience this in India. When people are working on a project, they'll tell you, kal ho jayega, kal ho jayega. But the kal is not tomorrow. The kal is, whenever next time you talk to them. So the essence is that, if you're an artisan, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a, artisan or I'd call it a cultural economy participant, or building a business, always be transparent. If you're not going to get this done tomorrow, tell someone that, look, it's going to take me 5 days, but in day 5, you will have it, and hopefully on day 4 and not on day 6. Very important and very critical. The second point was about the integration. When I was running my tech business, I had over 200 people working for me in India in many centers, and we would bring them into Canada for that, that experience on the ground. So we'd get them to spend a month there, but we didn't put them in a hotel. I had actually arranged homestays for them, and the reason for that was that they need to get into the fabric of what they're working with, fabric of the society here. So I'll leave it on that note, but transparency, in my opinion, and honesty is the number one skill that any cultural entrepreneur must put on the table from day one.
Yeah, Sally, over to you. Any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I have been thinking a lot about my own business, and it's come to a point where it either scales up a lot or it stays where it is. And I've actually been thinking about, how certain businesses choose to be consciously small, because scaling up is not always the right answer. Because I mean, I think it's always a good exercise to think about why you do something in the first place and why you started it and how it adds meaning to your life today. So I think I've actually been reading this book, and if you guys want, I can send a link of that. It's called Feminine Economies. So it's a very, by feminine economies, I don't mean women. I mean just a way of thinking. It's a very masculine thought to want to grow, to have this kind of scalable approach to things. Sometimes feminine economies also allows you to just nurture what you have in the sort of capacity that you first started it with, and it can just be about communities, and it can just be about purpose, and it can just be about, of course, profit, but it doesn't always have to be this kind of number crunch game. So yeah, I guess I just also wanted to share that as a cultural entrepreneur, most people come from very different diverse backgrounds, and not just economic backgrounds or number backgrounds. So it's okay to not want to grow in a certain way necessarily. Sometimes the growth is not linear, but it's circular. So to just think about circular growth and not linear growth. I think I would leave with that.
I'm going to come back to you, Saili, another time about talking more about this non-linear growth paths, because I think it's an interesting conversation to have. Just like Aditi mentioned earlier, there's more than one kind of funding. There's more than one kind of model to help you grow. There's also more than one kind of path to grow. It doesn't have to be a linear scale up where you go 2x, 4x, 8x, and so on. But there could be other options to explore. And that's something we definitely want to bring to our audience as well when it comes to the mindset around building a cultural business. With that, I would like to really offer my gratitude on behalf of the Punjab Cultural Project and our community of cultural entrepreneurs here in Punjab. Thank you so much for your time, for your input, your insights, and for sharing. And we hope to remain connected with each one of you as we progress on our PCP journey.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.